Welcome. I'm Jewish Arts Collaborative Executive Director Laura Mandel, and I'm honored that you've all joined us today. This conversation is meant to be a deep dive into artivism, the intersection of art and activism that is the core of the Be the Change public art movement. Be the Change, the concept for a project rooted in the Jewish tenet of tzedakah, or tzedek, meaning justice in Hebrew, was born in 2020 when American Jewish World Service former director and social justice warrior Ruth Messenger said to Israeli-American artist Caron Tabb, "To represent justice through art, I dream of seeing a larger-than-life tzedakah box inspired by the Lucite Museum donation boxes that says change in front of the Met Museum in New York." That was all I had to hear to know that this concept had incredible potential to invite us all into conversations about justice, and ultimately to help us all demystify a little bit the overwhelming task of making real change in the world, recognizing that this is a core tenet of Jewish life, but that artivism and repairing the world is an everyone issue. I'm grateful to my partner in crime, Caron Tabb, who's the lifeblood behind this project, to Ruth Messenger for inspiring and supporting us at every step, to the Jewish Alliance for Law and Social Action for being thought partners in identifying and understanding legislation that underpins each of these works of art, and to the many, many partners who are central to bringing this project to life. Our first Be the Change show is on view in the Boston Fenway neighborhood for all of August through October 2022. And then it's going to take on life in Cincinnati in the fall through our collaboration with the Ish Jewish Cultural Festival, along with Cincy Nice, and then hit the West Coast with our partners and collaborators at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This program today is one of 3 programs that features 2 of our Boston-based artists, as you'll see shortly, Caron Tabb and Jason Talbot. Our hope right now is to help us all understand how we can join them in being artivists. So for the program at hand, racism, hate crimes, and anti-Semitism are ever-present issues in our world that we just cannot ignore. For me and many here in the Boston community, the recent BDS mapping project was a very clear and poignant reminder that anti-Semitism and hate is alive and well here in Boston and around our many communities. So to delve into this, the art we're about to see and explore by Caron Tabb and Jason Talbot are 2 of 6 pieces in this Boston-based iteration of Be the Change. And my hope is that this conversation will dig into how these artists, along with others in this project, are illuminating important issues and how these issues of hate crimes, anti-Semitism, and racial bias are actually core to the many forms of injustice that Be the Change seeks to address. So to delve into the nuance of all of this, I feel so lucky to be with the brilliant team you are about to see before you. So before we get into the conversation, I'm going to introduce everyone. To start us off, we have inspiration behind this project creator, Israeli-American, Boston-based artist Caron Tabb, who is the definition of artivist and the spark behind this project. Next up, we have Boston-based painter, artist, and co-founder of Artists for Humanity, an incredible program for teens in the city of Boston, Jason Talbot. Next up, we have Ruth Messenger, as we said, social justice warrior, New York politician, and former president of the American Jewish World Service, to whom we owe so much for this project. Robert Trestan, regional director of the Anti-Defamation League of New England region, and an organization, if you don't know, that was founded in 1913 to stop the defamation of Jewish people and to secure just and fair treatment for all. Now the nation's premier civil rights and human relations agency, the ADL fights anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry, defends democratic ideals, and protects civil rights for all. And last, but certainly not least on this panel today, we have Rabbi Menachem Creditor, a beloved American rabbi, author, musician, and more, also the founder of Rabbis Against Gun Violence. So before we get to the specific artwork, I want to kick us off with some words from project inspiration Ruth Messenger to help set the stage. So Ruth, I want to talk
Yes.
a little about artivism. With these beautiful pieces in mind, give us a little bit about why we're here, why you think art is crucial, and why artivism really has become a passion of yours.
Okay, well, we're here because of Caron Tabb. I don't think there's any question about that. The way in which I came to this could be described as being a little slow, in that, I think I was born with the social justice gene. I have cared about fighting for equity in various forms, against racism, against sexism, against war, really all my entire life. But I would say that much of that time, I thought the ways to do it were limited to, get out there on the streets, pray with your feet, as Rabbi Heschel said, give people all the statistics and the facts, give them some avenues for activism, what they could do about it in the universe of political advocacy. And then when they didn't do enough of it, hit them on the head and try again. And then I gradually learned, significantly through my time at American Jewish World Service, that the best way to help people understand both some of the evils in the world and the best way to give them an inspiration that change was possible was actually to tell stories. And as some of the people on this panel and some of the listeners know, American Jewish World Service has supported hundreds of social change, human rights projects in probably 30 different countries around the world. And I learned during my tenure that literally almost any story of how people got together to defend their land against multinational corporations, to try to protect their girls from early marriage, to empower women to make decisions over their own lives. Each of these stories was more effective at engaging people than a speech with statistics. And then it gradually dawned on me that those stories were a form of art. And I was able to expand my own horizons to pay attention to what are all of the other ways in which art is in my life, and in which many artists, certainly including Caron and Jason, but I would say many, many artists use their amazing art skills to jolt the perception and the consciousness of the watcher or the listener or the reader, because it's plays, it's drama, it's pieces of art on the wall, it's sculptures, but those suddenly have a huge power, sometimes even more than a story, to just get to somebody and say, like, here's the issue, in case you glazed over when you were hearing the statistics, here's a story, here's a visual image, here's a beautiful piece of poetry that brings the issue home. And that was a strong line of thinking in my consciousness, in my mind over the last couple of decades. But it was literally meeting Caron and having her say, like, this is what my art is all about, and how do we connect these things, and how do we use art in public places to reach people and to engage them further in activism. And so with her shows, which I've been privileged to see and to read about, with her reaching out to me, we started with that one image, which came to me initially from an entrant into a contest. But the idea was, okay, if the lucite sculpture, I mean, I'm talking about a sculpture like 10 feet long and 7 feet high, but the lucite was literally just the letters of the word change, but it was three-dimensional, and in each letter, CHANGE, there was a slot, and people could come up and put their change in, so that instead of the kind of, for me, and maybe people won't like this, but instead of the kind of silly idea of throwing coins in a passing water fountain that then gets swept up and used for something, this was going to actually show people that more and more people walking by thought, oh, my change, the loose money, the loose coins in my pocket can go to help make change. And so it's that image of be the change, which is used in a variety of ways. Yes, we want people to be the change, and we want them to see that the word change should be out there on the streets, jolting them all with its sculptural, three-dimensional appearance to say change is what we need. And from that comes artivism.
Thank you, Ruth. Beautiful. Okay, so with that having set the stage, Caron, would you tell us a little bit about the rest of the backstory? I think, Ruth has now given us the real beginning. Now take it from there.
So first of all, I'm grateful to Ruth because she is my inspiration. I've always looked to people who take the gifts that they have, put them into action, move others forward towards social justice. I was born in apartheid South Africa. I grew up in Israel. I was at the square where Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated. So I feel like I have an activist gene. It might be more nascent than Ruth's and still growing. But I lie awake every day thinking to myself, what is going to be written on what am I going to write on my own gravestone? What did I do in my world every single day of my life to change the outcomes for others? And that keeps me up at night. And in my recent show called Humanity is Not a Spectator Sport, I made a tzedakah box. And I put it in air quotations because it's not really meant to collect money, but rather to move viewers from being bystanders to activists, to think for themselves what is the gift that each one of us has to give. And I'm not talking only about money. We each have a gift. We each have a talent. We each have something to give back to the world. And through these two tzedakah boxes, which I made, one in honor of Ruth and one in honor of Clementina Cherry, who lost her child to accidental gun violence, I've been inspired to think about that every single day. We live in a precarious world, and I lie awake at night thinking about these issues every day. I came to you, Laura, my partner in crime, and we do a lot of good trouble together. And together we birthed this idea of taking the tenet of tzedek, of justice, not just of tzedakah, charity, but justice, into downtown USA, Main Street America, and engage these passersby in these issues. So the idea was really to connect, to create these giant art pieces. Mine is right behind me in its formation. To take issues, real issues that resonate with artists, for each one of us to pick a cause which is close to home and close to our heart, hence what is shaping up to be a heart, and figure out how we move from concept to action. So connect with nonprofits, connect with people on the ground who are doing this work every single day, and engage bystanders in the one thing that they can do to become agents of change. And I think with everything happening and coming at us from so many different directions, the tendency is to turn the volume down, to shut off, to disengage, to live in our own bubble. And I feel strongly that we can't do that, that the ground is burning underneath us, and the time is now, and the gifts are ours to give. So together as a collective of artists, nonprofits, visionaries, community organizers, we together are stronger than alone. And so this is how Be the Change came to be. And I think what I'm doing is praying with my hands and trying to turn every single day of mine into ways in which I can make the world better. And I'm so excited. This is like a dream come true for me. How did this kernel of an idea that was born in a coffee shop with Ruth one morning on the Upper West Side turn into this now national program? And I'm honored to be in everybody's presence here today. So thank you.
Caron, we all owe you a huge thanks for making this a priority and pushing us. So thank you. All right, so before we talk a little bit more specifically about your piece, Caron, I'd like to shift to Jason and hear from you a little bit, Jason, about how did you get involved in this project? And specifically, I'll tell you, when you first showed me your sketch, this tree sketch, I have to admit, I looked at it and I said, oh, it's a tree of life. Like in Judaism, that is such a symbolic symbol, an important thing. And I just love that we had this like immediate synergy there. So tell us about this piece and what it's all about.
Well, so, I was, brought into this project by Caron. She's been a friend, a collaborator, and especially at my space at Artists for Humanity. And, I was immediately drawn to the idea of a justice vessel, a way to bring forth justice in this pretty unjust world we're living in right now. And, my life, I grew up in Roxbury in Boston. I grew up in a pretty tough neighborhood. Right when, I guess when I was a little kid, it was a wonderful neighborhood. We played hide and go seek, I had a great group of friends, but then, crack swept across my neighborhood. And, I was surrounded by dealers and users. And I took my lumps in that environment. But then in my efforts to escape that environment, I was confronted by the police and the criminal justice system. And it kind of came to a head in 1996 when I was arrested 6 times in 6 months. Now, I can't say I was an innocent victim. At the time, I was really into graffiti and I was tagging the streets and stuff like that. But I was trying to find a voice. I was trying to leave a mark. I was worried as, a teenager that, I wasn't long for this earth. I was worried that the street violence that was occurring around me, the target that was on my back from the police and the prison system, I felt like I was on a collision course. I was, I had the good guys and the bad guys chasing me down. And it really left me feeling hopeless and helpless. And it was at Artists for Humanity through art that I found voice, I found strength, I found a team, a community, I found safety. And I realized that as artists, it is our job to add that narrative to our struggle, to put words and imagery to these ideas. Sometimes, especially in these issues of justice, these are very complex ideas. They're very contentious. And I think sometimes it's important just to use an image that may strike strongly, deeply, to help people understand each other's situation. And with this piece, with this tree, this family tree that I'm trying is so hard to build, I want people to understand that, yes, people make mistakes, people end up in our justice system, but those people are still fathers, sons, daughters, mothers. They have families, and that we should treat one another as we would treat our family and not judge people based on the color of their skin, and really be impartial and just in the way that we administer our justice system. And I think that it's extremely important. I think the bias that we're seeing in our court system right now is pretty heinous. I think our judges are given an amazing power to take away someone's freedom. And I think that people who have that responsibility need to be held accountable. And we need to make sure, and I think we need to take action to ensure that the judges that sit on that bench are not operating with bias, and that our justice system isn't being used to keep down a huge community of Americans who deserve respect, honor, and impartiality. So, and hopefully a piece like this will open some eyes and help people realize that you're not judging other people, that we judge ourselves, and we should really do it with clear eyes and a clear conscience.
Thank you, Jason, for really giving us that really personal story and helping us understand this really big issue in a different way. Tell us a little bit more about the piece. So we're looking at it right now. I see a tree, I see handcuffs. I know when I first looked at your image, your sketch, your concept, I saw a tree. It actually took me a minute to process the handcuffs. Tell us a little bit more specifically about what those mean to you. What is this piece really about from that perspective?
Well, handcuffs for me were a tremendously traumatic experience. To be cuffed. I'm a pretty artistic person. I'm a pretty empathetic person, and to have these cuffs placed on me as a young man, as a teenager. I mean, to this day, I still feel traumatized by it. It still affects me. It still affects my relationships. It affects the way that I carry myself. It's something I wish I didn't have to deal with. It's something I don't think I deserved, and it affects me, my community, and I think it affects everyone who it has happened to. And I think that, of the young Black men that I know, it'd be pretty tough for me to find those that have not ever experienced handcuffs on their wrists, and to have your freedom stolen, even if only for a few minutes while being detained, or to just be dominated and accosted, assaulted. It's really held captive. It's not at all a trivial experience, and I think this particular punishment is just handed out really without any conservation. It's just and young people of color in the city of Boston are being accosted in this way consistently. And so I wanted to put handcuffs on the limbs of this tree, this family tree, to make it, to symbolize, to create an icon that would show people, how terrible of an experience this can be. And when I say 6 times, 6 months that I was arrested, it was it was a consistent part of my life, and one that I had no idea how to escape. This system is so powerful and so ever present that I had no solutions, and until it ended up to a point where I felt I just needed to hide. I needed to not be myself. I had to cut my hair. I had to stay indoors. And it was that way, for a very long time. I felt right up until Trayvon Martin was murdered. I was hidden, and I felt like I couldn't walk freely. And I currently now I want to be myself. I want to be able to speak freely. I want the people in my community to feel as though they can celebrate their culture, and that America celebrates and appreciates their presence. And so I put these handcuffs on this tree to show people that it's ridiculous to handcuff a tree. It's ridiculous to systematically, for generations, oppressed people with our justice system.
Amen. And Jason, I just love that you just said, I went into hiding, I wanted to be invisible. And now this, as public art, is the most visible. So I just feel like this is like so powerful. And I'm thrilled that we can make this happen. So, okay, Caron, I want to go back to your work for a minute before we open this up for a bigger conversation. For me, it's really powerful that the name of your piece is Prisoner A7713. Tell us what that name means and why you chose it.
So first of all, I just want to thank Jason for being honest and sharing his story, because I think, as Ruth said, it's only by understanding people's true lives and stories that it really hits home and becomes personal. So thank you for sharing that, Jason. It's extremely powerful. So prisoner A7713 was Elie Wiesel. This is the number that was tattooed on his arm when he arrived at Auschwitz, which is one of the concentration camps during the Holocaust. He was lucky enough to escape. He lost most of his family members, and he became, he is both a Nobel laureate, a writer, and a human rights activist. And so my piece, Prisoner A7713, which tagline is anti-Semitism equals racism equals hate. Sliding back in time, or did we actually ever move forward? And as Jason's talking about hiding, I'm thinking about the fact that I would like to buy a Magen David, a Star of David, to wear as a pendant. And what does that mean? And should I be hiding that Jewish identity of mine because of what we are seeing vis-a-vis anti-Semitism? It has not gone away. In fact, it is. We are seeing it left, right, and center. And I know Robert will talk about this in a little bit. But for me, at the heart of it is hate. It is hate for the other. It is hate for people who look different than me, who speak a different language, who come from a different place, who wear different clothes. And at the essence of what Jason is talking about, and at what I am referencing, which is my family history, my ancestors who were lost in the Holocaust, and anti-Semitism all around is hate. And so that's at the heart of it. And I've been working off this heart model, which I received from a friend who is actually a cardiac surgeon, and told me something that is really powerful. He said to me, when I open up somebody's chest while they are in surgery, and I repair their heart, there is no difference. All of our hearts are the same size, more or less, look the same, operate the same way. And so for me, I'm bringing it home to the heart of the matter, which is hate. And eventually this chicken wire, which is in its formation, will be a heart on a giant concrete plinth, tattooed with the number A7713, which is back to the heart of the matter, which is hate. So that's about my piece.
Thank you, Caron. Okay, so with these incredibly powerful words in mind, I'm going to shift us now, before we get to Robert, to speak about some of the real on-the-ground issues that really we're trying to address here. Menachem, in every conversation for these panels, we have a rabbinic voice, because there is so much that Jewish tradition has to say about these issues, these works, etc. And obviously, when we were thinking about Caron and Jason's work specifically because of your experience, you came to mind as an important Jewish voice in this conversation, because, as I said before, you are a rabbi, an author, a musician, and a leader in the world of social justice. So I'm curious, when you listen to Jason and to Caron, and when you really start to process all of this, what's your vision for a better world, and how can we make that change through art and projects like this?
Laura, I appreciate the question. I want to answer in the most authentic way, which is to look to Caron and to Jason and to say a better world is full of not just your art, but the message and the vision that animates it. it's clear to me that religion and politics and borders and all of the ideologies that have historically maybe tried to do good have often failed, especially when they become so self-absorbed that they forget what art cannot forget. Real art brings the soul out because it is the connective tissue between all of us, even if the specific designs and expertise are the artists. Real art speaks. Ultimately, a vision for a better world is full of the artist of artists, right? Capital Aleph, capital A, right? Because for me, theologically speaking, I look at not just Jason's tree of life, but Jason's eyes, and I can see the artist's work, and I hear Caron's pain, and I hear the artist's work, and I have a hard time when rabbis answer the question that you just asked, Laura, because I don't know. I don't know. I come from a place of vulnerability, and I stand on the shoulders and side by side with giants and teachers of mine like Ruth, because I wouldn't have been involved in any of the justice work that I do had Ruth not finally brought me to Ghana to see how little I knew by actually stepping into a vulnerable world. I never would have gone with a faith delegation to the White House after Sandy Hook had I not been willing, and I wasn't willing. I knew a lot of Torah and a lot of Talmud. I've been trained. I grew up in a very learned home, and the kind of work that I would have considered justice was entirely tribal. God doesn't really know from tribes. The Torah might say this people's destiny matters, and any faith tradition, sacred scripture might point to the specific journey of a people. But among the most radical of realizations that anyone should have when looking at least at the Torah's vision of the universe is that it didn't start with a people. It's a radical thing that God's greatest concern is the universe. And all people came from that heart, that broken, wounded, loving, willing, available, artistic heart. Because the world wasn't sufficient somehow. God wasn't sufficient somehow, even for God. And so a vision for a better world gets back to that original notion, which is a loving, loving source of all, where not only does a surgeon tell me that our hearts are the same, but the artist who designed these gorgeous things we call us, that artist sees us all. And my vision for a better world, given the real one that we inhabit, is one where we try to see the world like that a little bit more. I know, watching this world of ours, watching my children grow up in it, how fragile and broken it feels right now. But I also know that there have been warriors, and I don't mean to point to Ruth over and over, but there are warriors who have marched these marches and pointed the way, and they stood on the shoulders of other giants too. We have work to do, and on the one hand, a famous Jewish sociologist once said, we are the ever-dying people. We think we are the last generation. And that inspires, demands, foments, cultivates, curates, as it were, the best of us to rail against mortality and against the forces of destruction in the world. I hate to be so black and white about it. I don't think that that's healthy all the time, but I do think that part of the world is trying to hurt the rest of the world. And that's the part of the world that doesn't see the whole world as worthy. Ultimately, I think that it's our turn, and I look at my children every time I despair. And I think the luxury of despair is something that tradition doesn't afford me. I want to offer one quick textual teaching, because the combination of what Jason and Caron were evincing, were sharing, reminded me of a section of it's called Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Ancestors. I just taught this recently, but it's as if I'd never read it until I heard you both speak. To what may one whose wisdom exceeds their deeds be compared? Right? They learn a lot, but they don't do a lot. To a tree with many branches but few roots. When a wind comes, it uproots and overturns it. To what may one whose deeds exceed their wisdom be compared? To a tree with few branches but many roots. Even if all the winds of the world come and blow against it, they cannot dislodge it from its place. And so maybe, Jason, specifically to you, I just want to say, I want to be on your family tree. I'm proud that our roots know each other so well. I am so inspired, Caron, to have my heart held by you and to know that when we do our work well, it's not going to solve all the problems, but our children will see the art we've created, the friendships that we have forged, and the vision for the world that we have done our best to further.
Thank you, Menachem. That was incredibly powerful and beautiful. And I just have to say, I appreciate that you said this alone won't solve the problem, because I often find myself saying, art is not, I don't pretend to believe that art is the answer to anti-Semitism and hate, but I do believe it has to help get us there. And that without art and this opportunity to bring us together through it, we need to be able to do something. So, and I'm with you, a few of you have said this actually, that despair is not a strategy. And Ruth, I think that probably comes from you. So I'll point back to you again, but I think Menachem, just to hit that on the head so clearly, I've really been grappling with this, with despair is not a strategy. So thank you for pointing that out to us. Okay, so with all of this heaviness in mind, I'm going to take us a layer heavier for a moment. Robert, you are with us today representing the ADL New England, and not just the ADL, but I want to hear from you a little bit about what is the real life context we're working in here? What is the opportunity for art? What is going on in the world that we really need to be changing?
Thank you. I don't really want to be the, I wish I wasn't the heavy, but I will say that hope is actually part of the journey, and just this conversation is quite inspiring. So hopefully everyone leaves with some sense of inspiration. But, you know, we're seeing, you know, what Jason talked about, what the concerning part is his experience as a younger person. It exists today for many, many others. And it isn't just the personal experience. There's statistics, there's data that actually back it up. And, you know, people often ask me, why is it happening in one community or another? And I often say that, you know, no community is immune. So in the Boston area, we saw a rabbi who was stabbed in broad daylight in the middle of a summer afternoon last summer. Earlier this year, we saw a hostage taking at a Texas area synagogue. I mean, these are escalation of the hate that Caron talks about. That's at the heart of it all. This is how it's operationalized, and it's something that I see, experience, and talk with people about every day. And there's an interesting overlap that happens here. And so my work is often focused on anti-Semitism and tracking anti-Semitic acts. But I think it's really important for everyone to recognize that the people that target Jews, they frankly target people of color just as much. It's all the same to them. They target people who are immigrants in the same way that they will target people of color and people who are Jewish, or people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. So all the different groups, we're often sort of talking amongst ourselves and sort of in this space, but the people who have hate in their hearts, they don't see those distinctions. They see us as all together, and they act in that particular way. And I think that's part of the challenge that we have. Now, a couple other examples. I want to point to two other things that I think highlight where this overlap comes from and why the art can be so impactful. Last year in the Boston area, and I think people in the Black community are much more familiar with this than people in the white community, where a what we learned was a white supremacist sort of operating under the radar murdered two people of color in Winthrop, Massachusetts, sort of just across the river in Boston by Boston's Logan Airport. And it's pretty clear that, you know, he targeted two people of color, and he was confronted by law enforcement. He was actually shot and killed by the police. But what was his destination? His destination, the working theory is the synagogue. And if you're anyone who's been to this scene, I was there. The place where he was actually, you know, stopped, you can see the synagogue in the distance. And so he was operating both the same time. And the local Jewish community, they saw the threat. And what was this man doing immediately before he woke up that morning and went on this violent spree? He was on websites on his phone, like they have the data on anti-Semitic websites. This is quite a serious thing. Earlier this summer, we saw Patriot Front, a white supremacist group, people who participated in Charlottesville, people who participated in the insurrection. 150 of these white men, part of this group, marched through the streets of Boston. And there's a really interesting question here. Now they're disseminating hatred. They're masking their anti-Semitism, racism, white supremacy through like patriotism, which is we have a whole other discussion about why, you know, what that actually means. They hide their faces. They're wearing face masks. They seem to, you know, inspired by the KKK. But there's also a really important question here that for me resonates with what Jason was talking about in terms of the bias in the criminal justice system, in the law enforcement system. So here you have 150 men, and some of you may have read about this or seen the photos. They come into the city of Boston, they're on the subway system. People are calling 911 and telling that they haven't done anything wrong, but citizens are seeing something's wrong here. And then they have a staging area at another subway station inside, you know, in downtown Boston. I pull up with a U-Haul truck and they're unloading shields. And nobody, but you know, from what we know, Boston police, nobody actually asked any questions. And so the question, you know, the question that resonated with me, and I'm a white guy, but I know, you know, I think everyone was asking this question here in the Boston area is if a truck pulled up with 150 black men dressed in uniform, faces covered, preparing to do something, carrying shields, would somebody you know in police lingo do a field interview, an FIO? Just ask a few basic questions, and that didn't happen here. And I think that really resonated for many people in the city of Boston, particularly in the community of color. So you've got these sort of people coming in to disseminate hate, spread it into the community, and then our own system that's designed to protect people may not have worked in the way that we expected. And I'm not saying that the commanders or the individuals on the ground are racist. I'm not saying that, but to me, it really it highlighted, I think, some of the inherent bias that is built into the systems in which we live. You know, this is our society where we live.
Robert, I appreciate that you don't want to always be the heavy, but I just have to say thank you so much for giving us that, because I know for myself, it's hard to listen even. It's hard to think that our police who are there to protect us are not necessarily protecting us all. And it's a really, really scary thought that I just want us to sit with.
Let me just add the flip side.
Please.
There's also good stuff here. So when the rabbi was stabbed, Rachel Rollins, who was the Suffolk County District Attorney at the time, she immediately said, this is, you know, there are civil rights and hate crime charges that are warranted here. So, you know, we you know, part of the work of everyone, you know, it was said earlier that, you know, everyone's got a gift. Well, part of the gift is also making sure that we're holding people accountable, the people that are, sort of running our communities, to do the right thing. Like we all have a gift, but we also all have a responsibility.
I think it's a beautiful framing. Thank you. So now I want to open this up for conversation a little bit. But before we go there, actually, Jason, I actually want to tap you for a second and go back to something you talked about, because you said that early on you were a graffiti artist and how that caused some problems for you, but that gave you voice. And I got to say, to me, that is the epitome of artivism. So tell us more about how the experience of being a graffiti artist really informed who you are. What was your graffiti about? What was that voice you wanted to have? What were you saying? And where does that take you now?
That's pretty fun. I mean, now I have to say, this all kind of started young man, when I was a young man, and it's continued to this day. Some of those juvenile ideas are still there, but I had a sketchbook. I would draw my graffiti names, and I came up with a graffiti tag of SWAT, SWAT, like the SWAT team, Special Weapons and Tactics, because deep down, I did see the police as heroes. I did see crime in the streets, and I did hope that I would be protected by the police. As I progressed in my artistic practice, I no longer felt that allegiance. I no longer felt pride in having a police name, a name that was associated with police enforcement. So the SWAT in my name, I changed the acronym to mean simultaneously witnessing all things, with the idea that through empathy, by understanding that, I am we are us, that we're the same. We're going through the same things. We all must, live and die. We must all have, love and shelter. We are all similar in so many ways. And just by understanding those similarities, I could see everything. I could see everyone. I could understand and appreciate everyone. And if I saw everyone else, when I looked in the mirror, when I understood us all as earthlings, I could have an allegiance for all the people around me. And so I wanted to share that message with people by tagging it on mailboxes. And I had a good time doing it. A lot of my works are about this idea of trying to see more deeply, and being an artist. For me, I feel as artists, we actually practice seeing, we practice observation. We work to see more deeply. We want to understand the details of whatever we're trying to depict. We want to observe the intricacies of the strokes that we make with our brushes, or the materials that we're using to sculpt or construct. And so as observers, we need to be critical, and we need to use these well-trained eyes of ours to see, observe, understand the world, and then recreate it in an artful, expressive way to help send messages to the people around us, so that they can see us in themselves, so that they can appreciate the people around them. And ultimately, I think that's what's missing from these masked men traipsing around Boston. I think that's what's missing from these, police officers who are too incompetent just to ask these people their names, just so that they can be held accountable for their actions. So, that to me is really at the crux. We have incompetent police. We have incompetent judges and lawyers who aren't able to impart justice in an impartial way.
Change is what we need, which is what I think Ruth said at the outset. This speaks to that.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important that this art, these ideas, these conversations don't happen in a vacuum, right? It's all about how do we bring community into these conversations. And I think something that's so crucial to this project that has, you know, if you're an activist or you're a community organizer, it's a given that you are inspiring to lead others. And I think what's interesting is I've been thinking a lot recently about how artists are leaders in their own way, right? You're saying what you have to say in a beautiful way. And I think that with art as the leadership in this project, thinking about how this art is creating a movement about how we can all be the change. Menachem and Robert and Ruth, you're not just experts in this conversation today, you're crucial partners in this work. And I know all of our artists are working with different partners in this work, thinking about how we can engage community, not just to put some beautiful art down in Fenway or anywhere else, but to think about how are we engaging community in this. So I'm curious, first and foremost, I want to hear from Jason and Caron. Tell us a little bit more about your community engagement in this and how you think that resonates with all of this. But I'm also curious to know from Menachem and Robert and Ruth, like how you think about this community piece, you know, and how we can think about that, you know, as engaging people through this art in different ways. So whoever wants to take that.
I'm happy to jump in. I go so often between despair and hope all the time. And Ruth and I had a conversation about this recently this week about, so what can we do about it? Because I think that's where despair comes in, is when you look at the magnitude of the problem and you think to yourself, well, I'm just a small one person and how can I make a difference? And that's so easy to fall into that trap. And I think one of the things that was key and is key to this project is the tangible actions so that we are connecting to the art. From the get-go, the idea was for the art to inspire and for it to lead to activism. And so by doing that, we're partnering with a swath of nonprofits and offering people tangible outcomes. This is the one thing that you can do today, tomorrow, to lean in, give your voice, use your gift, and to really make a difference. So my partner for this issue is the ADL, and you know, we're working on a list of a variety of active and action items that people will be able to do. If you scan the barcode, it will take you to go on the website, you can see what those are. And we're also working with voter registration. You know, at the end of the day, the one thing that each one of us can do that will really have an impact is to vote, to change the outcome by creating legislation. So we're working with, you know, voter registration projects around the country. And part of it will be at Fenway, where you can go and you can, you know, fill out cards, make cards, and lean in that way. But every one of the artists is partnering with a different nonprofit, with a different consortium. And I think that is the key, is that we're not doing it alone, we're doing it together, and we're offering tangible outcomes.
And Menachem, I saw your hand up. Do you have a thought?
I do. I think one of the elements of our specific moment, which I think Caron just pointed to, and Laura, your question really embodied, is not only sort of, as we said before, that despair isn't a strategy, but also that in our moment, loneliness is pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we deeply need, and I think art can provide and inspire, is to convene as community, to remember that we have neighbors who we are called to love as ourselves. And so the more we can bring people to the public space, first of all, how healing that is on its own level. And second, to use what brought them out to truly bring them out and into each other's spheres. And so obviously doing this together as hopefully partners of different segments of community so that we can observe the art, learn from the artist, wonder about it, be inspired to create more, and then to do what it pushes us to do in the world. But I think the basic level, and I'm probably speaking from a pastoral place on this, is to acknowledge the loneliness and isolationism that has made all of this even worse. So to counter the isolation by emphasizing community is already a step towards healing.
I want to add one thing to that, which is that I think what's so important here is that most people are almost only, people are most of the time in a response mode, right? They either see it, they could be somewhere and something happens in their community, they're reading about it, they're seeing it on television, and they're sort of like bombarded by this kind of hatred, regardless of, who it may be directed to. And I think the public art piece actually allows for a different kind of thinking in a different moment. It's not in the moment when people are saying, they're almost asking themselves these questions and, getting angry about what's happening around them in their community, or someone who is being targeted, or, on the receiving end of violence. But this can serve as inspiration, but what I would say is almost like inspiration in the right moment, right? When they're sort of in a bit of a distance from the actual, incident or whatever it is. So I think that timing in combination with the message and creativity of the art, I think that's kind of unique. And, that really could inspire people, like the gift that we all have. Everybody's gift is going to be a little bit different. And the art may have a bit of a different inspiration.
Yes. And I think for the piece that I'm working on, I definitely, I want people to see it and experience it in space. I want them to be moved by its size and its strength, but I want it to be explained. I want people to understand that it isn't just meant to be beautiful, that it's meant to carry this message. So I hope to work on a documentary that talks about this work and what we hope to achieve with it, as well as a song, a beautiful hip hop piece produced that we can share out for people to listen to as well, so that it is well rounded, and that this message is echoed through many medium, so that more can get this message and be moved by it.
So that was beautiful, Jason. And what you said before about how you come to your art and what you see as the power of the vision of an artist. So Laura and Caron, I'm always a troublemaker, but I'm thinking, what can we do in these public displays to have some of these voices, and to have a place when you're looking at Jason's work with all these things that I don't really understand, like QR codes and things like that you push a button and you can hear Jason talking about it. And what could we do to urge people, to go into the art? I mean, to be standing there and looking at in different places, the two different pieces of art, and to give them two questions to take going in. I mean, even if we don't control whether they do it or not, but just to hand them two questions, or to ask them to think about it. And Caron, I'm as strong as you on voting rights, but how do we help people make that connection? Menachem and I have exchanged a few words about all this, but I want to say on the despair notion, and it's important that people hear both halves of that very short sentence, because it's not like we're never going to despair. There are moments of every day where I despair as to what's going on. And you have to let that feeling, you have to allow that feeling to be a part of who you are. You can't just deny how you're feeling. And then you have to say, okay, I'm feeling despair, but it's not a strategy. Taking a step for change, doing something that inspires hope, listening to how these artists see their work playing out in the world, that will take you, help you, lift you out of your despair, because it's not a strategy and other things are. So I just think we have to help think about ways in which the public displays would bring these issues, would help facilitate people's thinking about what they're seeing.
Thank you, Ruth, for sort of wrapping that up so beautifully. I love that we're talking a lot about hope and how to bring these issues to people's minds. And I just want to say that while we're talking right now about police bias, racism, anti-Semitism, hate crimes, these are just, as hard as it is to even say, two areas that we're exploring through Be the Change. And of course, there's so many areas of injustice in the world, specifically through these pieces in Boston. We're also exploring issues of mental health, transgender equity, domestic violence, environmentalism. And the key is, as Caron said at the top, these are all interconnected. We cannot take these apart from one another because these are part of a global issue where we are as all interconnected. And so Menachem, while this conversation right now is not technically about gun violence, one of the reasons we wanted your voice here especially was because as the founding rabbi of Rabbis Against Gun Violence, obviously there's a connection here. This is a very sad and tragic outcome of what happens from these other pieces. So can you tell us a little bit about your work around gun violence and how you came to found the organization?
I returned, as I said before, from Ghana on a trip with American Jewish World Service that Ruth helped organize and recruited me to, and returned realizing that I knew so little. I thought that I was going to go and offer something, and that tells you how little I knew. You don't bring rabbis to help build things. You get them to sit and listen to stories and experience a part of the world that I might have thought before was far away. So I returned open, and I think that's the most important place from which to begin. Right after we returned, that was the year that Sandy Hook, the school massacre, happened. And a neighbor across the street, a pastor named Michael McBride, asked me if I wanted to join a group of faith leaders to speak to then Vice President Biden's staff at the White House. And I said, yes, of course, I have to. I don't know anything. The world is a place that I need to learn about and add my heart to, and I knew nothing about that too. And that became clear when I got to the White House and realized that there were 90 faith leaders, 81 of whom were people of color, and 9 of us were white, and all 9 of the white people were the rabbis. And that tells you again how little I knew. So we sat at the table. There were different tables. They asked us to mingle and to meet each other. And, you know, it might have been the holiest moment of my rabbinate to date. And the facilitator asked us to discuss at the table, tell everyone at your table about the gun violence death that affected you most. And the rabbis, to the one, except for my father, who's a rabbi and who had a very significant loss in his life from gun violence, all of the rabbis said, I don't have a story. And so many of the pastors at the table said, you want me to choose one? And that told me how little I knew too, because I was there in response to a school shooting, a massacre beyond comprehension. But 3 new towns happen every day in America, and I didn't know. And so my work began with that moment. The rabbis, I think, felt the way that I did, that we had to become involved, which meant we had to learn. We had to stand as partners, not standing in front, but really with open hearts and open ears. And we began this group, and it turns out that one of the first obstacles we had was the stigma of talking about gun violence in Jewish communities, because so many protected, bubbled people said, this isn't our issue. Now, as I shared before, from a theological standpoint, I don't think that's what God would have us say. The death of my neighbor isn't my issue. And quoting from other incredible heroes recently lost in the world, Paul Farmer called this pragmatic solidarity. If you're not going to respond the way righteousness would have you respond, just remember that what you think of as a problem far away actually will come to you. And then you'll realize that you should have responded in solidarity in the first place. Just practical thinking. And so the more work we did, and now we have about 1,600 faith leaders from around the country, ready to mobilize, responding often. And, you know, we said despair is not a strategy, and Ruth correctly guided us to let it in when it visits. This has been awful, and we've produced 4 anthologies of rabbinic responses to gun violence, the most recent one just 2 weeks ago. And, you know, it feels like we're tilting at windmills often. And so what I want to say is that what I have learned in this work takes heart from that phrase, tilting at windmills. It's from Cervantes' Don Quixote, right? And why did he tilt his lance, which means get ready to fight? Because there was a windmill in the way, but he thought it was a giant, and he was on a noble quest. So what we have in our way are windmills, and we treat them like giants. They're windmills. There are structural obstacles towards this in the way of this noble quest. But we do what the spies in the Bible did when they visited the promised land. They came back and said, there are giants. We were grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we must have seemed to them. Well, we're not grasshoppers. We are sad sometimes, but we are mighty people, and we can channel all the good that's within us and the sadness because we care, and tilt our lances and actually throw them away and just show up for each other. There's got to be a way forward. The activism that I thought I was beginning defined my heart because I had to open up and realize how little I knew. I don't know that I have a plan. I just know that I have to be available.
It's incredibly powerful, Menachem. And the most perfect segue to what I want to ask you all next before we close out is this whole conversation has been challenging. And yet I'm amazed, and I just love hearing that each of you have come to this issue of hope and community and a lack of despair as really being the key words. So with that in mind, I would love to hear from each of you. If you had to give your elevator pitch of what you wish would be different in the world because of this project, or that you hope people will go out and do, what would people do? What is your 15-second elevator pitch of what you hope be the change will spark?
I think it's actually people recognizing what their special gift is, and then using it to work towards some form of change. And it could be like super small, like it's a lot of small changes that could make a huge contribution. So it may be someone who's never registered to vote, and they decide, okay, I'm registering to vote. I'm going to exercise my right, and I'm going to be there. It may be, you know, speaking up and, you know, suddenly not being a bystander. So I'm hoping that, you know, somebody sees the art, it triggers something in them, and they say, I have the gift and I have the responsibility.
Well, I love what Robert just said. I do not do elevator pitches. Menachem will tell you that even when I talk about my work at American Jewish World Service and tell stories, none of them are, very few of them are, you know, 15-second pitches. But while we were talking, and I've been part of several of these tapings, so I keep talking about artivism, but it reminded me of a quote that I think I had not shared with Caron. So maybe I'll do that. One of my hero figures and teachers was Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. I've referenced him indirectly already in several of these discussions. But what came to mind was in Rabbi Heschel's last television interview, which was shortly before he died, he had actually asked the reporter or interviewer, before the end of the discussion, be sure to ask me what advice I have for young people. And so the reporter asked him what advice he had for young people right near the end of the interview. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said, let them know that every word matters and every deed counts. But above all, let them to be sure to build their lives as if they were works of art. So since we're talking about art, what I would say is I would like for every person to think about what is that thing they can do that further shapes who they are, as Robert said, that draws on their strongest skill to find a way to go and make a difference. And let them think about that, as Caron and Jason have, as constantly building them as themselves as a work of art, ourselves as a work of art.
Ruth, I couldn't agree more with you, because I think for me, what's most important is the self-reflection piece. For each of us to look every day in the mirror and think about how we can better ourselves, how we can better treat the person who frankly picks up the garbage, you know, who mows our lawn, who packs our groceries, who's driving in the car next to me, you know, who's my neighbor. First of all, I would hope people self-reflect on who they are as human beings and how to be better human beings to themselves and to people next to them. And then I would hope that after they're done despairing, they wake up the next morning and pick that one organization, that one cause, that small deed that Robert was talking about, and do something about that one cause that day, and then repeat the next day.
I so love what Caron just offered. That pause is akin to what I was going to wish for people, starting with me, which is the ability to breathe again, to see the art and to pause, and to sit still long enough to breathe, so that I don't only sit still, but so that I can feel a little bit stronger. And I'll just quote Heschel too, because I like to. Ruth isn't the only reason I like to, but I really like to because she just did. He said in that final interview before his death 50 years ago, "When I see an act of evil, I'm not accommodated. I don't accommodate myself to the violence that goes on everywhere. I'm still surprised. That's why I'm against it, why I can hope against it. We must learn how to be surprised, not to adjust ourselves." And so when I look at art, it surprises me. When I look at anything holy, especially a person, it surprises me. And so I hope people through this project will feel surprised and breathe and a little bit stronger.
I think for me, some takeaways I would really want our audience, our viewers, to take away from the artwork that we're producing is that, you know, this idea of tzedakah is, you know, to me was so beautiful because it's about equality. It's about, you know, taking our abundance and pushing it towards those without. And so when I sit in a community that is safe and that is treated properly, I want to make sure that those that are treated unjustly receive the same treatment, that I use whatever abundance I have to give back to those who need it. And so I'm blessed with a little artistic talent. I want to use it to bring justice to more people. I want our judges and our justice system to be held accountable. Impartiality is crucial to their job, and if they don't show it, then they are incompetent, and maybe they need to be replaced. I'd love to see more diversity on the bench. I'm so overjoyed at the appointment of Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. And I want to see more of it. I want to see our young people of color pursue careers in the justice to ensure that their community members and peers are treated with respect and honor when faced with the court system. So I hope that my work can do a little bit. Oh, but also I do want us all to feel empathy when it comes to our community and the people around us, and not to let skin tone or creed or anything else blind us of the humanity of our community members.
I just have to thank you all for your honesty, for your depth of thinking here. I am totally inspired, and I hope that everyone watching is as well. So before we close out, I think oftentimes we have these really heavy conversations, and as our friends and partners at the Tzedek Box organization say, there isn't always enough time to reflect, to think about how do you take these conversations and do something. So as I said, we have a partnership with Tzedek Box led by Rabbi Andrew Mandel, the goal being that it's a new ritual supporting Jews and their allies in the ancient pursuit of a more just society. And of course, we are quite in sync here. And the idea is that every time you strive to build a better world, you add a note into your own Tzedek box, or tzedakah box, as the root word says. So, excuse me, as Rabbi Mandel says, we often have important and weighty conversations about justice, again, without ample space for reflection. So right now, we're going to spend a few minutes reflecting. But before we go to that, we are very fortunate to have Menachem with us today, because he will be performing his song, Olam Chesed Yebaneh, a more just world we will build, a song that's really about love. And so Menachem, before you perform this song, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about what this song is, where it came from, and give us the context so that when we hear it, we really appreciate.
Sure, thank you. The three Hebrew words that make up the song are Olam, Chesed, Yibaneh, which translate roughly into a world, right? Olam, Chesed, love, Yibaneh, will be built. And the original source is the book of Psalms, and the language actually suggests that God will do all the building. But throughout Jewish history, you can find traditional interpreters who do non-traditional interpreting, including this idea, which is that only if we are builders of the world from love does God actually do that. We are God's hands in the world, as it were. And so to quote one philosopher, Maimonides said, "Nothing I could do would ever make me worthy of this incredible blessing of today." And so I know that it must be a gift of love that gave me the chance to be in this world, now speaking as me. So that's our job, to pay it forward. And I originally wrote this song for my children, for their covenant ceremonies when they came into this world, because frankly, I'm really worried about the world into which I brought children. My eldest was born in the months after 9/11, and I was scared then, and I'm scared now, maybe a little bit less scared because she's here, and she is her own kind of warrior, thank God, as are the rest of our children. And I never thought anyone else would sing the song. I wrote it for them. And now when they go around the world in Jewish and not Jewish circles, the song, which in English says, "I will build this world from love, and you must build this world from love. And if we build this world from love, then God will build this world from love." And the most important word in the song for me, and the one that makes me emotional every time I sing it, is the word must. I will, I know I will, but you must, because clearly it's going to take the next generation's commitments to ancient ideals to bring us to the place we already should have been.
Beautiful, Menachem. Thank you for sharing this with us. So just so everybody knows, as Menachem plays, we hope you'll reflect upon this conversation, the art, the prompts you see on the screen. And then whether you just want to write yourself an email, whether you want to download the Tzedek Box app right now and put your note into the box, we hope that this is making space for you to think about how you can account for your own acts of justice. And following this beautiful song, Menachem will also offer a blessing for all of us to help move us forward with encouragement and hope and marching orders as we go forth to be changed in the world. So with that, Menachem, please take it away.
I will build this world from love. And you must build this world from love. And if we build this world from love, then God will build this world from love. Olam chesed yibaneh. Olam chesed yibaneh.
Dear God, Holy One, beloved, this fragile, beautiful world of ours stands at a precipice. It always has. Perhaps it always will. Every moment seems to be a crossroad. Perhaps that was the plan. Perhaps there was no plan. But we promise again, Mother of all, you've got us, and we've got a plan. Perhaps divine mystery, that's you in us. Perhaps our yearning for a more created world is truly your spirit stirring in our mind's eyes, inspiring us to be the change we dream to see. Perhaps, after all, yours has never been a plan, but rather seeds of sacred vision. Perhaps you, dear one, and we, your children, are learning every day and doing our best to see more clearly and feel more fiercely. God, that is a true gift, to see with your eyes and to love with your love. For these blessings and the gift of more days in which to be of service with you as partners in creation, may we be ever thankful. We know we are called to repair that which remains broken, and so we pray. May we walk humbly, but not too humbly, as we channel your spirit coursing through our bodies to bring more justice, more kindness, more hope, and more love into the world. May the coming days find us ever ready to walk in your ways by walking with each other. and to do with our bodies what we often ask of you, to see, to discover, to build a truly beautiful world, a world of chesed, of love. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Menachem, for giving us such beautiful and inspiring words to close out on. Thank you to all of you. I know I've said this already. This has been a really difficult conversation, and I am so appreciative to all of you for all of your honesty, your thoughtfulness, for your art on all and many levels. This is, as you've all said, how we make change in the world. So I just want to say thank you for giving me, and I think all of us, some hope for how we can actually all be the change we wish to see in the world. If anybody's interested in going out to see the actual art in Fenway or in Cincinnati or in LA, all information about the project is at jartsboston.org. I hope you'll check it out. In addition to just seeing the art and hearing other programs like this, there's a whole array of materials and resources for you to go out and make change in the world. So thank you all for setting this incredible tone to set us off into the world to be agents of change and to all be artivists. I'm grateful and appreciative to all of you. Thank you.